since its gameplay was made public, Resident Evil 4 has appeared to be incredibly faithful to its predecessor. That was acknowledged to the delight of many fans of the original Resident Evil games, especially in light of how loosely interpreted Resident Evil 3 was in comparison to the original game. Though some fans may actually find this to be a detriment if done poorly or if it adheres to the source material too closely, more information has thankfully ensured that Resident Evil 4's enduring iconography will be reprised. Resident Evil 4's island setting from the first game has recently been confirmed. This makes sense given how faithfully the remake appears to be adapting the original, but this may have actually been a contentious decision given how some fans view this part of the game. Although the island is a crucial part of the story, in its day, it was regarded much worse than the rural village and castle regions that came before it. The island is back for the remake, which might cause it to drag the game down with the same banal tone shift. Rarely does the third act of Resident Evil stick the landing. The issue with the Resident Evil 4 island is not unique to Resident Evil games. These third acts are frequently disappointing and jarringly at odds with the main setting of the game. In fact, Resident Evil Village demonstrated this by using a subtitle that refers to an unremarkable location to make its setting a character in and, as a result, the undeniable star of the game. Each Resident Evil game's main setting is extremely significant to its iconography. However, Resident Evil can't seem to help itself when it moves that focal point to a different place in the game's concluding chapter, because it essentially yanks players out of the setting, atmosphere, and gameplay they were enjoying. That place ends up being contentious. The third act of Resident Evil 7 takes place on a wrecked ship and in a mine tunnel after having players explore a rundown, revolting estate, making it the third act setting that has generated the most controversy of any Resident Evil game. In contrast to the explorable village that players spend the majority of their time in, Heisenberg's factory in Resident Evil Village was also unremarkable and unfavorable. Resident Evil 4 faced the same issues before either of these games because its island setting was such a stark contrast to the game's iconic rural Spain setting. Island in Resident Evil 4 needs to live up to expectations. The island is contentious because it tonally shifts Resident Evil 4 from a survival horror game to an action-oriented game, complete with rooms filled with military granados and explosions, which disturbs its established atmosphere. Even though it broadens the gameplay, it's a bad change in comparison to earlier locations that have a lot more character and nostalgia. If Resident Evil 4's earlier settings were not as significant and lavish as they are, players might not have had such a mixed reaction to the island setting. Of course, the island in Resident Evil 4 is where players can find the Regenerators and Iron Maidens of Los Illuminados, but that is probably the most useful addition that sequence gave players. Each location in Resident Evil 4 has a lot to recommend it, and the island's inclusion in the remake allows for a more distinctive presentation. There is a lot of potential for this remake of the island if Capcom approaches it knowing everything there is to know about what fans loved and despised about Resident Evil 4. On March 24th, Resident Evil 4 will be made available for PC, PS4, PS5, and Xbox Series X, S. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and support my channel.